Join the story family. Subscribe and stay with us.
My name is Lucas, and this happened when I was 21, during my first winter working nights. It was the kind of job you take because it pays a little better and you tell yourself you can handle being tired for a few months. I worked at a 24-hour grocery store just outside a small town in Pennsylvania. Nothing fancy, fluorescent lights, quiet aisles, and customers who mostly wanted coffee, cigarettes, and last-minute things they forgot. I was scheduled to work Christmas Eve into Christmas morning, midnight to 8 a.m. My family lived a few hours away, so I planned to drive home after my shift ended. I remember thinking it would feel kind of peaceful, working while everyone else was celebrating, then heading out while the roads were empty. The store was almost dead that night. From midnight until around 2, maybe 3 people came in. All of them were normal. Tired parents, a guy grabbing beer, an older woman buying milk. Around 2:30 a.m., a man walked in. He didn't rush. He didn't hesitate either. Just opened the door and stepped inside like he'd been there many times before. He looked to be in his late 30s or early 40s. Clean clothes, winter jacket, no cart. I noticed him because he didn't go straight to any aisle. He just stood near the entrance, looking around slowly like he was taking inventory of the place. After a minute, he walked past my register and down one of the back aisles. I went back to scrolling on my phone. A few minutes later, he came back with a single item, a small artificial Christmas tree, the cheap kind you put on a desk. I rang it up. "Merry Christmas," I said automatically. He looked at me for a second, like he hadn't expected that. "Yeah," he said. "Merry Christmas." He paid in cash, took the receipt, and didn't leave. Instead, he stood a few feet from the counter holding the bag. "You working alone tonight?" he asked. I hesitated, then shrugged. "Yeah, night shift." He nodded slowly. "Long hours." "Comes with the job," I said. He smiled faintly, then walked out. I didn't think much of it. About 40 minutes later, he came back. Same jacket, same calm expression. This time, he grabbed a bottle of soda and a pack of batteries. Again, he paid in cash. As I handed him the receipt, he said, "It's quiet tonight." "Yeah," I replied, "pretty much." He leaned slightly on the counter. "Do you ever get scared being here alone?" I laughed awkwardly. "Not really." He nodded, like he was satisfied with the answer. He left again. By the third time he came in, it started to feel strange. It was around 4 a.m. He walked straight to the counter without grabbing anything. "You close at 8, right?" "Yeah." "And then you head home?" I paused. "Yeah." "Long drive?" "A couple of hours." He tapped his fingers lightly on the counter, then smiled. "Roads should be empty." He left without buying anything. I locked the door behind him and realized my hands were shaking slightly. For the next hour, nothing happened. I tried to focus on cleaning tasks, straightening shelves, anything to pass the time. I kept glancing at the entrance every time headlights passed outside. At 5:30 a.m., he came in again. This time, he bought nothing. He just walked in, stood near the end of an aisle, and watched me. Not staring aggressively, just watching. After a minute, I said, "Can I help you with something?" He shook his head. "No, just didn't want to be outside." That answer didn't make sense, but I didn't push it. He stayed for almost 10 minutes. Then he left. At 7:45, 15 minutes before my shift ended, I was counting the register when I heard the door open. It was him. He walked up to the counter and placed the little artificial Christmas tree on it, the same one from earlier. "I don't need this," he said. "I can't do a return without the receipt." He smiled. "That's fine." He pushed the tree closer to me. "Just thought you might want it." "You'll be driving home alone. Nice to have something festive." I didn't touch it. "I'm good," I said. He looked at me for a long moment. "All right," he said. "Drive safe." Then he turned and walked out. I locked the door behind him, heart pounding. When my shift finally ended, daylight was just starting to show. I grabbed my jacket, walked to my car, and sat there for a full minute before turning the key. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I saw him. He was parked across the street, sitting in his car with the engine off. He didn't follow me, but I watched him in my mirror until the store disappeared behind me. I made it home without anything else happening. But every Christmas since then, I think about that night, about the questions he asked, about how he always seemed to know what came next, and about that little Christmas tree. I never worked another overnight shift after that.
My name is Ethan, and this happened a few years ago, right before Christmas. I didn't talk about it for a long time because I never knew how to explain why it stayed with me. On paper, nothing terrible happened, no one got hurt, but some experiences don't linger because they were loud or dramatic. They linger because of how quietly wrong they felt. That year, I was working in a different state. My company gave us a few days off, and I decided to travel home for Christmas. Flying was expensive, so I booked a night bus instead. It was about a 9-hour ride, mostly straight through. I figured I'd sleep most of the way and wake up close to home. The bus left around 10 at night. The station was crowded, but there wasn't much holiday spirit. People looked tired, carrying bags, kids half asleep, coffee cups everywhere. I boarded early and took a window seat somewhere in the middle. For a while, the seat next to me stayed empty. Just a few minutes before departure, a man stopped at my row. He checked his ticket, looked at me, nodded, and sat down. He looked completely ordinary. That's what I remember most clearly. Nothing strange about him at all. He wore a jacket and a scarf, carried a backpack, and looked to be around 40. As he sat down, he smiled slightly. "Long night ahead," he said. I replied politely. We made some small talk about the weather, holiday traffic, how chaotic travel always gets this time of year. It felt like a normal conversation between two strangers who would never see each other again. Once the bus started moving, the lights dimmed. Most people fell asleep or stared at their phones. I put my headphones in but didn't turn on any music. I just watched the dark highway slide past the window. About an hour later, the man spoke again. "Heading home to family?" he asked. I said yes, home for Christmas. "That's a good thing," he said. "Not everyone gets that." There was no emotion in his voice, just a statement. I nodded, unsure how to respond. He started talking about himself vaguely, nothing detailed. He said he was visiting relatives too, but didn't say where. His voice was calm and steady. He didn't seem nervous or overly friendly. After a while, I noticed something that made me uncomfortable. He began asking questions that felt like follow-ups to conversations I didn't remember having. "You mentioned your dad doesn't really like Christmas, right? You usually take the bus when you go home, don't you? You moved out right after high school, if I remember correctly." I couldn't remember telling him any of that. I tried to think back, but the conversation had been stretched over time, broken up by stops and noise and fatigue. I told myself maybe I had said it and just forgotten. At the second stop, a lot of passengers got off. The bus felt half empty after that. The man beside me didn't move. He stared forward, like he was listening to the road. "Ever get the feeling," he said, "that some trips aren't supposed to end where you planned?" I turned toward him. "What do you mean?" He shrugged slightly. "Just a thought." After that, he went quiet. I put my headphones back in, this time actually playing music, but I kept glancing at him without meaning to. At the next stop, he got off. I felt relief almost immediately, which surprised me. I hadn't realized how tense I'd been until he was gone. The bus pulled away. I fell asleep. I woke up with the unmistakable feeling that someone was watching me. It was instinctive, the kind of awareness you don't reason yourself into. He was sitting next to me again. I didn't hear him come back, didn't feel anyone sit down. I just opened my eyes and he was there. "You sleep well," he quietly said. "You barely move." My heart started racing. I glanced around. There were a few people in the bus, but they were far away. "You're getting off at the next stop," he added. I knew I hadn't told him that. "No, one after that," I said. He looked at me for a moment longer than necessary. "Oh, right. Got it mixed up." I didn't fall asleep again after that. When my stop approached, I stood up early. He stood up too. "You said one more stop," he calmly said. "I changed my mind," I replied. He didn't respond. He just watched as I grabbed my bag. When I stepped off the bus, the cold hit my face hard. The bus pulled away almost immediately. I stood there, watching the red taillights disappear into the dark. I pulled out my phone to text my parents that I'd arrived. That's when I saw the message. It was from an unknown number. "Merry Christmas, Ethan. Say hi to your family for me." I stood there for a long time. The bus was gone, the road empty, my phone glowing in my hand. I didn't reply. The number never texted again. But I don't take overnight buses anymore, especially not around Christmas. My name is Mark, and this happened to me a few years ago on Christmas Eve. Even now, thinking back on it still makes me uncomfortable. At the time, I was 31 years old and living in a small house on the edge of a quiet town in Pennsylvania. It was a dead-end road with woods on one side and only a few houses on the other. Winters there were always quiet, especially around the holidays. Most of my neighbors left town to visit family, and that year was no different. My wife had gone to stay with her parents along with our kids a couple of days before Christmas. I stayed behind because of work and planned to join them after the holidays. I had been alone like this before, so I didn't think much of it. December 24th was calm. It snowed lightly all day, and by evening, everything outside was covered in white. After sunset, I locked the doors, turned on the Christmas lights in the living room, and made myself a simple dinner. I kept the radio on just to avoid the house feeling too quiet. Around 10 that night, I was getting ready for bed when I heard something that made me stop in my tracks. It wasn't a knock on the door. Someone was tapping on my window. Not hard, 2 short taps, then a pause. I stood still in the hallway, listening. A few seconds later, it happened again, same window, facing the backyard. I walked closer without turning on the lights and carefully pulled the curtain back just enough to look outside. It was dark, but the snow reflected enough light that I could see part of the yard. I didn't see anyone. I told myself it was probably a branch or snow falling from the roof. I was about to walk away when the tapping came again, louder this time. I didn't open the window. I stepped back and went upstairs to the bedroom instead. I locked the door, got into bed, and grabbed my phone, trying to calm myself down. After a few minutes, I almost convinced myself I was overreacting. Then I heard footsteps on the porch. Slow, deliberate. I got out of bed and looked out the bedroom window. From there, I could see part of the front yard and the porch. A man was standing near my front door. I didn't recognize him. He was wearing a dark jacket, no hat, with his hands in his pockets. He wasn't moving. He was just staring at the door. I stayed where I was, watching. After about a minute, he stepped closer and gently tried the doorknob. Then again, no panic, no force.
I backed away from the window and quietly locked the bedroom door, even though I knew it wouldn't help much. I tried calling my wife, but she didn't answer. It was late. That's when I heard his voice. "Mark, I know you're home." I still don't know how he knew my name. I didn't respond. He knocked on the door. Once, then again. "I don't want any trouble. I just want to talk." I opened my phone and dialed 911, hovering over the call button. The man stepped away from the door and began walking around the house. I could hear his boots crunching in the snow as he stopped at each window. When he reached the bedroom window, I heard him stop directly below me. "I saw the light in here. Don't be scared." I pressed call. While I was on the line with the operator, he started tapping on the window, not hard, but persistent. The operator told me officers were on the way and instructed me to stay where I was. The tapping stopped. I listened as his footsteps moved away from the house. A moment later, I heard a car start somewhere nearby and drive off. The police arrived about 10 minutes later. They checked the area but didn't find anyone. In the snow, there were footprints leading from the road to my house, circling it, then heading back toward the road. One of the officers suggested it was probably someone who knew the house was empty and decided to test their luck. They advised me to not stay alone and to consider leaving for the night. I took their advice. A few days later, I came back to grab some things. Inside my mailbox was a Christmas card. No name, no return address. Inside, there was only one sentence written in plain handwriting. "Too bad we didn't get to talk." I moved out that spring. I haven't spent Christmas alone since.
My name is Andrew, and this happened on Christmas night, about 4 years ago. At the time, I was 27 and living alone in a rented duplex in northern Michigan. It wasn't the kind of place people dreamed about. Old siding, thin walls, and a driveway that turned into solid ice every winter. But it was cheap, close to work, and quiet. Very quiet. That year, I didn't travel for Christmas. My parents lived several states away, and I had picked up extra shifts at work. Most of my neighbors left town for the holidays, which meant the entire block felt abandoned by the time Christmas Eve came around. On Christmas Day, I worked a half shift and came home just before sunset. It was already dark, and snow had been falling on and off all day. I remember feeling oddly calm that evening. I heated up leftovers, turned on a movie, and settled in for what I expected would be an uneventful night. Around 9:40 p.m., I heard a knock on my front door. It wasn't aggressive, just 3 firm knocks. I paused the movie and listened. I wasn't expecting anyone, and deliveries had stopped hours earlier. I walked toward the door and looked through the peephole. There was a man standing on my porch. He looked normal, mid-30s, average build, winter jacket, gloves, no hood, no smile. He stood slightly back from the door, like he didn't want to be too close. I opened the door halfway and asked if I could help him. He said he was looking for a house number nearby and thought he might have the wrong address. His voice was calm, polite. He didn't slur or seem nervous. I told him the house he mentioned was 2 streets over. He thanked me and stepped off the porch. I watched him walk down the driveway and disappear into the dark. I closed the door and went back to my movie. About 20 minutes later, there was another knock. Same pattern, 3 knocks. I felt my stomach tighten. I checked the peephole again. It was the same man. This time, he was standing closer to the door. I opened it a crack and asked if something was wrong. He said he thought he recognized my car and asked if I worked at a warehouse nearby. I told him yes, briefly, and asked why. He said he thought so. That was it. There was a pause that felt too long. Then he smiled and said, "Merry Christmas." I nodded, set it back, and closed the door. I locked it. That's when I realized he hadn't walked away. I stood quietly behind the door, listening. His boots stayed on the porch. I could hear him shifting his weight, slow and deliberate. After about 30 seconds, he knocked again. This time, I didn't answer. I turned off the lights in the living room and moved toward the kitchen, trying to stay quiet. I watched from the side window as he stepped off the porch and began walking around the house. My duplex shared a wall with another unit, but that side was empty. I could hear him crunching through the snow, stopping occasionally like he was looking in windows. I grabbed my phone and texted my sister, telling her something weird was happening. Then I opened my camera app and started recording, just in case. A few minutes later, I heard him at the back door. He didn't knock this time. He tried the handle. Once, then again. Still calm, still controlled. I locked myself in the bathroom and called 911. I whispered to the operator what was happening. She told me officers were already on patrol and would be sent immediately. While I was on the phone, I heard him leave the back door and walk along the side of the house. Then I heard something I didn't expect. He laughed. It wasn't loud, just a quiet chuckle, like he found something amusing. Then there was a knock on the bathroom window. I froze. The window was small and frosted, but I could see a shadow just outside it. I backed into the corner, holding my phone so tightly my hands started to ache. The operator stayed on the line, telling me to stay where I was. The knocking stopped. A minute passed. Then another. I didn't heed her footsteps leaving. Instead, I heard his voice, muffled through the glass. "I know you called someone." That was when I broke down. I started crying without even realizing it. The operator told me to stay quiet and assured me help was close. A few moments later, red and blue lights flashed through the frosted window. I heard someone shout commands outside, then footsteps running. By the time the police knocked on my door, the man was gone. They searched the area, but didn't find him. In the snow, there were footprints leading around my house, stopping under each window, then heading down the alley behind the duplex. The officers told me it was likely someone casing houses, looking for easy targets during the holidays. One of them suggested I stay somewhere else that night. I packed a bag and drove to a friend's place across town. 2 days later, when I returned to my house, I found something taped to my front door. It was a small piece of paper, folded in half. Inside, it said, "I seemed lonely." No signature, no explanation. I moved out 3 months later. Every Christmas since then, I make sure I'm not alone.